Hi,
Hello.
Angelique. How are you
Hi.
doing?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm
Very
good.
good, very good.
You?
And you can see I've managed to, by the skill of special effects. This is live, augmented reality. I've actually managed to make the UK look sunny today through that window behind me.
Actually,
It can't be true, can it? Because it never happens. So can't actually be true. How are things with
yeah.
you?
Yeah, good. It's a sunny day as well here in Salvador, Brazil. I have a
Of
nice
course.
view over the bay from where I'm sitting right now. And yeah, I know there's beautiful tropical beaches just across, but we're still happy. We're still happy to be here and leave the beaches for the weekend.
Very
Um,
good.
Yeah, so because today we are very excited about this topic. This
Hmm.
is an important topic. And so my name is Angelique Slop. I've been an HR leader in an interim manager in many companies for many years, multinationals. And you have your leadership roles from a leadership development point of view in companies. And we know one of the biggest struggles that we have and that we are really looking a lot at also in our HR mastermind groups is how to influence the board as an HR leader.
Right.
Because as an HR leader, we look to an organization from a different perspective than, let's say, your CEO or your CFO, who doing their job really good, but just that involves having a different perspective and a different way of thinking. Well, we look at
Yeah.
strategic HR, and especially when it comes to the future of work, because the future of work is actually strategy. So we have to imagine where the world is going, and then find the strategies to meet the world where they at in 3 years from now or in 5 years from now. And in order to do that, we need to align the boards, lead a strategic discussion, and make sure that there is real change happening. And it starts with having that influence and that credibility. So it's a very interesting topic. You have, from your leadership and development and wiser leadership experience, you have developed today's content. So I'm happy
Yeah.
to pass to you. And very curious to I also want to welcome everybody here who is joining us live.
Mm.
Also, the people watching the replay later. Obviously, if you are live, say hi. Let us know where you're calling in from. We can make this super interactive, so you can ask all your questions right now, right live, and we can pull them up, and you can get your question answered right now by one of us, and also either the other participants can chip in with their advice as well. So I think it
Yeah.
would be great if you share a lot of tips today as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth saying that there's always a bit of a delay. So if you've got any questions that are generally about this, just get them in and we'll deal with them when they come up. And if we don't cover them, we'll come back to you. So that's absolutely fine. Yeah, it's a tricky one, to be honest, because we've got half an hour. So we're trying to get as much in as we possibly can. So if people help us generate content by putting loads of tips in the comments, that will also help as well.
Yeah.
So,
Oh,
Angelique, oh, go on. You want to say something
no, just
first?
wanted to say, because I know this
Go on.
topic is the kind of topic that I don't, for me, I don't have a hard stop after 30 minutes. So if you also have any, can run out, because it's like, people can join, they can go off, and they can watch the replay.
Yeah.
So we can
Yeah,
have a,
true, true.
find that it's like really worth it, and I'm happy to stay a little bit longer today.
Well, I mean, we always go over a little bit anyway, so let's just assume that's going to happen a little bit. But you get 30 minutes of like core value. So, I mean, one of the
Emma,
problems I've got when we talk
Emma's
about, oh,
joining.
hiya. One of the issues that we've got when we talk about this topic is that it's huge and there's lots of stuff that's spoken about it, and we also have the challenge that there's a lot of nonsense spoken about it. So like the latest thing is kind of the neuroscience of influence, that kind of stuff, and there is some truth in there and there's an awful lot of rubbish. So I've tried to distill this down. I've also made a few assumptions when we've talked about this. because we know, for example, who our stakeholders are. And if I was delivering this to a group or was working with a larger team, I'd get them to think about their stakeholders first and then prioritize them. We've chosen the board. That's what we've done. We also know who we are, which is predominantly HR, future leaders. I have delivered this content to senior leaders, even board members, actually, in a number of different organizations. So I've just tweaked it slightly for our purposes today to make it a bit snappier. But this kind of training is really, really useful. So what I've tried to do with the 30 minutes to make it feel a little bit different is I wanted to kind of bust a couple of myths, and then hopefully that will help people to kind of get something immediately they can put into practice straight away. So I have got some slides. I know it's going to be a miracle that I've actually prepared slides, Angelique. That's normally your job, but for once I've done it my way. And also the focus of this is actually that people kind of get influencing skills backwards. So I've sort of made, again, this slight assumption that you've got this idea or a project or something that you want to influence. Like, well, that's what comes up for us in the community a lot, isn't it? It's like, oh, I've got this thing, this sort of pet project. I think it'd be really beneficial for the organization. I think it's a great idea. It's a bit future of work, or it's a bit human-centric, or it's something that resonates with our group and our constituents in the club. And now I need to get it going. And in my experience, when people come to me with that problem, they often go, I've got a presentation tomorrow, so I want you to help me present it better. Or, you know, I need some tips for communicating effectively because I'm sitting down and I'm kind of going through a paper with the board and I want to kind of sell it to them a little bit. In my view, that is completely backwards. And influencing doesn't start at the point that you've got permission to speak. And even for those people who've got a seat at the table, quite a lot of the time, the kind of all the stuff goes on in the background, and then all of a sudden the paper gets presented. There's a date the paper's getting presented. Even, you know, I've worked in a lot of tech firms and modern organizations. Even they still have that traditional way of doing things. So the first thing I'm saying is it's backwards. So now that we've established that that's backwards, I'm going to work through these different facets of influence. Basically, we've got the personal relational, the situational relational, and then the credibility. And credibility includes a whole load of stuff around personal power and that kind of thing. And that's the bit that people tend to spend more time on. So I want to kind of take them out of that. I want to postpone that. Relax, everyone. We're going to talk about that. We're just not going to talk about it right now. We're going to talk about some other things first. So let's talk about personal relational. Angelique, I don't know if you're going to hate me for doing this, but I'm going to do it through the medium of a rom-com. All right, so you might hate me for doing this, but I am a big fan of Brooklyn Nine-Nine. I recently saw an episode where the lead guy, Peralta, was trying to win over his other half's dad. And this is a very common rom-com trope. And what they do is they try and find out all the facts, all their likes and dislikes and that kind of stuff, but in a really kind of removed way. In fact, in this case, he actually had a binder full of information. Unfortunately, the dad found the binder, it all fell apart. And you know the story because you've seen it 100 times before. They connect because they have things that they both really believe in. Normally, they both love the same person, or, you know, in this case, they both love solving a case or something like that. So this is the reverse. We're saying he did it the wrong way around to start with. So we're starting with the personal relational. We're starting with the things that make people tick rather than facts about them. So this is the bit in the rom-com where the two people realize, oh, we're the same. We share interests. We kind of get each other. And this mostly gets leveraged at the individual level, which is also a mistake that a lot of people make, is they try and influence the whole board all at the same time. And what I'm saying is you need to break down the people that you need to influence. And as soon as you do that, by the way, you probably spot some key players that aren't on the board that you also need to influence, because sometimes there'll be someone who's at that table who maybe isn't the real driver of, say, the financial agenda or the marketing agenda or whatever it might be. So as soon as you start to break people down as individuals, that's a good start. And it's basically about understanding what are their personal drivers. And the way in which I help people to understand this is to think about what would they talk about irrespective of the circumstances. So if you took them into a different organization and a different situation, what would be the thing they really talk about? I remember having to win over a customer service director once. And the reason I kind of got him onto my side was because the only thing he cared about was the customer experience. You would probably be able to put him in a CFO position, you'd probably put him in a CEO position. He was naturally suited to being a customer service director, but he would always talk about the customer experience. So I knew, having had a couple of meetings with him and spoke to other people, that was the way in. And just some pointers here then, other ways in which you can get into that personal relational space is through the values of the person, the ambitions of the person, the things that really drive them. And the good news is people are leaking clues about this all the time. In everything they say and everything they do, they're leaking it all over the place. They may not always talk about it objectively, but they're leaking it all the time. So I'm going to pause, A, for questions, and also to get your thoughts on this. I know I talked about the golden rules later. We didn't go into much detail about this. So, what are your thoughts? Can you think of times when this has helped you?
Yeah, it's quite interesting. So the first thing that I wanted to comment on is that, so I just pulled your sheet away to.
I'll
to
let
give
you. It's fine.
So yeah, we connected on very much on values when we got
Right.
to know each other 2 years ago, and obviously in every situation where we would be talking about new ways of working, human-centered organizations. And that's what we've been doing. And I think even in terms of ambition, so yeah, we have the support network, and all the work that we do to support our audience is to make that change, to make. So you can see that is a very strong base to start working together. And I think I'm also an entrepreneur, so I look a little bit from this entrepreneurial perspective
Right.
also on that on those three things. And in fact, most people don't like the word selling, but if we are building relationships and we want to bring change, we have to sell our ideas. We have to get people on our side and on board to put their energy in the direction that we think is best. And maybe even then, we get the people in our team helping us, even
Right.
shifting a little bit of our opinions maybe and getting a better outcome. So that
Yeah.
whole that process of influence, I think, yeah, it could be in your own HR team, it could be in the board, but I really recognize those areas. And I would invite every HR leader who's watching this just to have a little look around and think about your board members right now and see if you can pinpoint their values, why you are connecting with them values, what their
Right.
drivers, what their ambitions are, and just make that little exercise in your head and see how it
Exactly.
can help you connect.
Exactly. So this is like it's sort of homework, but it's the kind of homework that's really hard to do without actually building a relationship with someone. And you're right. People don't like the word selling. I'm not a big fan of the word selling. But the basic idea is, even if you're not selling, people need to buy. So people need to buy into an idea. They need to be behind it. And we'll talk a little bit about getting that emphasis right. But fundamentally, you're going to struggle to move things forward if you haven't connected one person's interests, the fundamental values and drivers, with your interests. If they are poles apart, you've almost got no chance of influencing them. You're going to have to influence other people, and they're going to bring that person along. So this is why this is, for me, the starting point, because it tells you whether or not it's worth investing effort in that particular person. And bear in mind, I'm not saying you should write off board members. The reality is there's nearly always intersecting interests. You just need to find out what they are.
Yes. And I think just to add a little bit of a tip that I've been using, and like I know it's kind of a common thing. If you were to have your 5 board members and you want to go and pitch an idea in the full board meeting, it really makes sense to already get some people on your side.
Yeah.
And obviously, you choose the people that you tick the best boxes with on the levels of value and the levels of drivers, because these are the people that you might want to go to first, because at least you have them in your side, and then you leverage the influence of a bigger group of board members in that dynamics of that actual meeting where you're pitching your business case.
Yeah, exactly. So Emma's kind of set us up nicely, because she's asked a question, which is probably too big to put on the screen, but she's basically made the point that she's trying to influence someone whose values are counterproductive. So we'll get into some of the other elements in a moment that might help with that. But yeah, I mean, basically what we're talking about here is particularly in a kind of VUCA environment and the kind of environment that we're in now, where there's lots of changing priorities. If you haven't got someone bought in, as soon as something changes, their priorities will change. So the idea here is to try and make them realize, assuming it's possible, this is not about manipulating people, but if you've got something that aligns with someone else's values, helping them to realize that will mean that even when things get tough, they will still support you. So this is why this comes as number one. Should we have a look at number two?
Yes.
Let's have a look at number two. So number two is situational relational. Now this one, again, is probably something people are more likely to already do, more so than the first one, I think. They're more likely to do this one, but still they often don't start at this point in time. So this is often what people refer to when they kind of say know your audience, because when you talk about an audience, you generally don't think about working on individual levels. So you have to work on what you know about that group of people. We're still talking about a board, so that's a great opportunity. You can definitely find out what's going on for each person. So this is the I have a binder element of the rom-com, where they've collected lots of facts about this person. They think that means that they know them. And of course, to some extent, that is true. And so this kind of information, you don't have to know the person that well to find out. It helps. And to actually speak to them and find out what's going on for them is important. But this thing is about the situation they find themselves in. So it's things like, is turnover a problem for them at the moment? Have they got challenging objectives that they're trying to meet? Is there a problem that they're trying to solve? I sometimes use the phrase, well, this doesn't work well for everyone, kind of what keeps you up at night? And there's often some leaders who kind of go, well, nothing keeps me up at night. And of course, it's metaphorical, right? So it's like, what is the thing that's bugging you? And sometimes it does keep them up at night, but they're not going to admit it anyway. So what is the problems that they're trying to solve? So this is almost like the first one is really just about the person. And then this one is about their problem and their challenges. This one is kind of more rational, whereas the previous one is more emotional. So this is just about hitting that second tone. And this one, I would say you can always make inroads with. The first one sometimes is quite difficult. It takes a bit longer. This one you can always make inroads because there's always facts that you can find within the organization. If you're new to an organization, you can go and ask people the facts about this person and what they're responsible for. I'm going to invite you to wade in again, Angelique.
Yes. So that personal, the first sheet, the personal, thinking from us as a community, we are more looking at that first when we select our members. So if you look at this community lens and how you get, you could of course have the approach and say, okay, this is a problem that we all have. Let's say how to engage your employees in a more remote, and then we bring everybody together when it comes to having the same HR related issues, which we do, but the first one comes first, and we are always attracting the people that think the same, that have the same kind of ambition. So I think from that point, I recognize that we don't go straight to that second part, but we really look connect on that first part first. And then the other thought I had, which is quite interesting, because if we are HR leaders, we're always talking about culture and building community in our organization and creating engagement. And we go into to present our business case in the board. We might forget about that. If as you say, that most people go to that second part straight away. So it might be good for HR leaders to reflect back on that and maybe think first about what binds us and what connects us as board, and create that community feeling first in that leadership team. Will make it so much easier to get people into your team when you start presenting, and also you have an increased understanding why people might be reluctant to accept your solutions, or when they are critical, because you can better place them, and there is a better base of trust and community.
Exactly, yeah. And it's worth saying, one of the really, I heard this model coming through with an interview with Ricardo Semler. Right, so you obviously know him. Lots of other people know him. Author of the Maverick Solution, owned Semco. Really took a very different way of running the organisation. Effectively removed all the managers, made all of their financial information transparent to all their employees, and kind of distributed accountability throughout the organisation. So a very forward-thinking way of doing it. He now has huge credibility, multi-million bestseller. He will only work with leaders who share that first slide, share that personal relational bit. As long as he can find intersections there, he'll work with them. He doesn't start trying to convince people. If HR try and bring him in and go, hey, can you come and revolutionize our organization? He'll go, well, I'll talk to the CEO, and if the CEO is genuinely on board, then I'll come in. But if he's not, then I'll go. And obviously, if they've got a different structure, that's different. But he always starts with that and says it's for him, obviously, he can pick and choose his projects. It's wasted effort if he doesn't have at least some buy-in at that first stage. Okay, so let's look at the last one, and then we'll talk about the golden rules after that.
To Emma's question, actually, because
yeah.
Because Emma says here, it's, as we say, it's a little bit of a large question. We can still put it up as a comment. So that he says, well, understanding my stakeholder values has driven my approach, and it has really helped. So there's the proof of the pudding of your theory. I'm currently in a position, however, where the visible values and drivers of the individual are counterproductive to the piece of work, and I'm still working to find the hook. So can you reflect on that, Trevor? Because like the similar approach would be, to stop working together, which is not
exactly
the realistic option
exactly.
for everyone.
Well, yeah. So I'm not going to pretend that this approach is a golden bullet. It's worked really, really well for a number of leaders. It's also worked really well for me. What I would say is that it sounds like some people in the same situation as Emma can try to make sure that there's a consistent approach from amongst her peers in how to influence certain board members, because at the moment that's diluting everyone's effort. So if they're kind of going in and bigging up, I don't know, I'll pick on the same example as a customer centricity. So if one person's going and bigging up customer centricity and getting someone really on board with that idea and connecting that value with their values, and then someone else is going in and talking about value creation and they're bigging that up, we're kind of pulling these board members in different directions, and the board members will opt out. So I think for her, that's the first port of call, is that if lots of people are trying to influence the same people, there's a very good chance you're going to pull in really different directions, and that's not going to add any value. But in reference just to the second hook, this would be my second hook. So making sure that you understand the situations of the person, even if you find it really hard to drivers or ambitions dimension.
Yeah. I can understand that. Then you could. There is also the situational relationships where you go, you put yourself in their shoes, you look at their perspective, and maybe there is a common interest in finding a solution for the same problem, and maybe from that angle you could move back to find what the real values are that are behind that, the perspective that they have.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes this is an inroad. So I've often, with my first meeting with senior leaders, shared with them and shown them that I understand this situation, which then encourages them to share more information about them. And as I said, they kind of leak that personal relational stuff anyway. So the more you can get them talking, the more you can prove to them that you're someone who's worth talking to, then you'll get some of that other information and that will come through. So yeah, you're right. This could be your starting point for building that second layer. All right, the last one, which is where a lot of people start before we talk about just a few golden rules, which I think will also bust a few myths. This is where a lot of people start, and they start there, and this is slightly controversial. They start there because it's lazy. It doesn't always feel lazy when you're working really hard on your presentation, doing loads and loads of rehearsals. But the advantage of this is we've moved from being very personal to kind of some things being slightly generic. So some of the situations of each individual board member will be true for the whole board. The objectives of the organization, for example, are facts that you can find out. This is now, it almost doesn't matter who I'm presenting to, because all of a sudden I'm just focusing on me, and the skills I'm going to learn are going to be applicable everywhere. So I'm not investing really any time in the other people. And if you think about that in any other circumstance, where you said, I really want to influence someone, but I'm going to just pretend I don't even know who they are. They could be a bunch of strangers. You already know and can hear that you're going to fail, right? Or you're making it really, really hard for yourself. So I don't know why we do that. And I think there's this distance sometimes between our objectives, particularly if HR doesn't have a seat at the table, and the board objectives. And with that kind of distance, we almost maintain it. So we're never told to stop doing the thing that we love, and then we suddenly try and bridge that gap really quickly in one meeting or one presentation. So I'm saying don't do that. This is not about focusing on presentation, because although that's obviously very good, you could undermine all of your efforts. One thing you can do is, go on.
How does this relate to imposter syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, you have to ask the difficult questions, don't you, Angelique? So, so we do have a slight issue in that imposter syndrome is one of those things that got rarefied for a little while and got attributed particularly to women. And there is a gender difference between imposter syndrome between men and women. But the reality is, everyone suffers from imposter syndrome to some extent. And because of the Dunning-Kruger effect, we know that the more you know, sometimes the less confident you are in what you know, because you appreciate the fact there's this huge body of knowledge. So this is not a particularly useful, or it's quite hard to action, but my 100% recommendation within the time that we've got is to get comfortable with not being confident, because that will be the biggest gift you can give yourself. And if you recognize that when you go in to talk about something, particularly if you're talking about something that is a little bit different or not a normal topic of conversation in a meeting, not just presenting to the board, any meeting, every single person there has a little bit of imposter syndrome. Every single person is kind of going, well, am I going to get found out for not already knowing this? Or am I going to get found out for not being able to understand this within the meeting and asking you stupid questions, things like that? So that would be my best kind of tip to get through this. And also, my only other big tip is do more of the thing you're not confident of, because that's the only kind of tried and tested way to really build confidence, is to do more of it. And that will obviously help with your presentation. And also, I would argue that probably if you've done the first two steps, which is one of the ways in which I encourage people to build confidence, which is build relationships and build your knowledge. So you've kind of done those, knowledge of the people in particular, you want to influence the knowledge of the problem you're trying to solve, then that should also help with confidence. But don't expect imposter syndrome to go away overnight, unfortunately. I wish it would
No,
or could.
I think they're kind of related, and I think the imposter syndrome, or in general the idea, especially if you have not the influence that you want to have yet.
Right.
This could be totally, you could be totally confident, but not having the influence because you're new in an organization, or the organization is not used to have HR at the table. And you are, maybe the former HR director didn't have the your way through to get there. If you do not start with steps 1 and 2, and you start with step 3, and this is a thing that I recognize for myself as well. I've been an interim manager, so I've been often in that situation.
Yes.
And the thing that you tend to do, you want to say something, you see that you don't have that influence that you want, and you think, oh, now I have to go and prove that I know it, and I've done this with
Yes.
this organization, and I have a master degree, so you should be listening to me right now. And I don't understand why. And I worked with this person, and they really liked me, and
Yeah.
you should know that person is famous. So you start to get
Yeah.
trying to and I don't know if it's an English word, but in Dutch it's like over screaming. So you're over screaming
Right.
yourself, trying to establish influence by focusing on that credibility.
I'm
And
totally going to steal that word, by the way. I think that's perfect. I've never come across it, but that is exactly what it is. You're right. In order to kind of build up your credibility and make yourself feel more credible, you throw all this other stuff, and all of those are legitimate techniques, by the way. I spoke to this person, I've got this degree, but they're very easy to overuse. And what you want to do is have them as kind of a last resort if you've had no other way of building credibility. So, great example.
yeah, I think and you look at the story, and I can definitely relate to back to earlier in my career, where I was like, I'm a woman, I'm blonde. You're like from the social study. I didn't have, like, at that time, not even a master degree yet, and I was always
Yeah.
in the men's world, in tech, and you're kind of like at the board, at the table, but you're not really being taken that seriously. And you feel the dynamics going on between the CEO and the CFO and the COO, and then maybe you're the chief marketing officer might be a little bit more on your side because they have a little bit more of that experience, customer and employee experience
Yeah.
fit. And then probably the last thing in your mind at that moment is thinking about, how can I build a stronger personal relationship with that CFO and see
Yes.
where I connect with him on a level of values. That just never
Yes.
occurred to me in those kind of
I take your
situations.
point. Yeah.
You're there and you have like 5 minutes to present your case. So you want to make sure that it's good and that people see it. And then the situational, maybe you take that, you can say, hey, we can save so much money. This is the business case. And then, even HR, it's difficult because it's so difficult to quantify. So that
Yeah.
situational is also not the best approach if you start there, because it's very, very hard to say, oh, we should be, working on employee engagement and a little bit more because it's good for business results. Okay,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
what are we gonna gain? And like,
Yeah.
there you get taken over by cost reduction. It's easier to quantify. So yeah, if you look at that personal, situational, and credibility, yeah, I like this. I think it's quite insightful to get back to that understanding. And we know it, but we also, like, in our day to day, we are probably not, most of us probably not using it
No.
sufficiently.
Well, the second biggest training contract I've ever awarded, unsurprisingly, I had to get the whole board on side. So I got the shortlisted providers in, and the people who won were a masterclass in influencing. And they arrived early, of course, that's a good start. And as the different board members came in the room, they walked up to each one and shook their hands, introduced themselves, and said, "Hey, how's this thing going?" Because they already knew all the projects that they were working on, and they'd also found out ahead of time who the primary decision makers were. And they did a brilliant thing. It was a property management company who owned you could probably work out how it is, but they owned a large area of property in the Docklands. And they said, and one of the things they did, this is kind of the situational relational, they said, how many spare square footage do you think there is available, prime real estate, in the city of London? And everyone looked at one another and no one knew. And they went, "Oh, 3 million square feet. That sounds very small. It's probably more than that." They went, "And how much of your current estate is occupied?" And then someone knew, obviously, the answer, 3 million square feet. They went, "Exactly. So every single one of your customers has a legitimate, viable option to leave and go somewhere else and not lose any credibility." And so immediately people were interested in, well, how are you going to solve that problem for me? So, that's with a company that was from the outside, could barely do any research, and it was still able to intersect those interests straight away. And, it will forever be in my brain. We're running late, but you said that was fine, so I'm just going to carry on. So credibility.
Yeah, I would
So,
like to know if Anna has the feeling that her question has been answered.
Go for it.
Um,
Let's give her a chance to come back, and then, because there might be a slight delay on it.
I
So
think
Emma,
so.
please come in and shout if you think it hasn't been answered or you want to build on that at all.
Why is it like? Okay, yeah, and I think yeah, thing is, as future of work leaders, as we call everybody who is in charge of workplace transformation, doesn't mean you have to be an HR director. Obviously, if you are an HR director, you should be a future of work leader, but that could also be team leads, business leaders, and even just employees, people participating in a team that are advocates for new ways of working. I think creating that influence has the credibility part that you say. It's like the I would say that is the knowledge. A part of that is knowledge. A part is being able. And I see that this is also what we're working on in the Hello Monday Club, because we share
Exactly.
this knowledge. We did some talks, for example, about 4-day work week. Because we think it's important that people, if you get that question as an HR leader, that it's important that okay, what I'm going to answer to this. You have to have the ability
Yes.
to have that, to be that future work leader. So basically, what I see is that, especially in this time, even before the pandemic, maybe HR had this kind of like sideline influence role. HR should be leading, the future of work leaders should be
Right.
leading the strategic discussion and driving the change together with the team. So it's a core skill. It is we have to know, we have to have this credibility. We should be understanding how we build really good business cases that are solving the problems that we have, which is the situational. And we should be able to meet people at the level of mission and values and ambition. And one of the things that we talked about a lot, and that is probably not enough on the table in those boardrooms, but I will invite every HR director who's in this live or who's watching this later to ask that, to actually mention this, that those leadership teams, these are now making decisions about what work will look like in 5 years from now and in 20
Yeah.
years from now. So
Yeah.
basically, this is the generation of leaders in a unique position in time that are creating a new world of work that is going to define not only how we work, not only our well-being, not only our professional development, but also broader society. I'm really putting that on people's plates.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
They all go,
It's a big ask, but I think it is what is going on, and you need to be realistic about that. And that's one
yeah,
of the reasons why I mentioned coherent knowledge, because I think that's what you get from peer support in particular, is you get to bash an idea around and you have to kind of polish it a little bit. Whereas a lot of the time, we know in the community, people come in, they go, I've read this study and it says one thing, and what they don't have is they don't have the full narrative. They don't have the full, like, oh,
Mhm.
and this leads to this, or this has this impact in organizations, or actually that's not true in this context. And it's really hard to stay abreast of all of that research. So one of the things I like is that we always try and, anyway, knock around a couple of bits of research in the community, or you and I have often got the wider context, and it's really useful for people to bring input, and then we kind of bring that into the group knowledge. So, and we're talking more about how the Hello Monday specifically works for influence, but that's not a bad thing, is it? But that's really useful to build that coherent knowledge, I think.
No, I do think it's, in if we look at our mastermind groups, we can say this is every time we have a new topic and there's a new different topic and there's a new business case and a new challenge that we address. But in the end, it is about having this influence. So
Yeah,
being a stronger and better future of work leader, and we also hold people accountable for that, and we challenge them to. So if people say, okay, I want to know what I can do, within my sphere of influence, we'll be like, okay, that's interesting, but we're actually bringing those people together to see how we can increase that sphere of influence, because this is where the real value is. And what I think that we do is that the reflection is very important also to find the best solutions out there for every problem that we have. But I'm just going to say nobody really knows what are the best solutions or the right solutions in the long term, because we cannot really oversee what will happening and how things will evolve. And we can have
yeah,
like an idea about developments, and obviously we have to anticipate on that. But I think we find better solutions working together, and also being able to reflect back to see the things that you're actually doing really well, or where you already have a lot of things going for you in this new
yeah,
world, how you leverage that. So
yeah,
I think working on those different levels is really helping people to increase their influence. And I know it's such a lonely role sometimes being an HR director. You're kind of in the table, but you're not in the table, and sometimes you're left out, and then you can have your say, but then you already know that people can be like, yeah, we're not going to do that anyway. So, and then you also your team that you want to lead and inspire, um, the overall organizational context, and it's just really so good to have people to connect with and give you that little push, so you show up more confident and more strong in the
yeah,
next board meeting. Yeah,
yeah,
like
yeah.
this.
All right,
It's a
let's
topic we could
let's.
talk forever.
Well, no, that's it. And what's quite nice, I think, is that you're right. I think that's a really really super point, which is that it is so easy to feel alone when you're trying to drive something. And so, one solution is the community, and that's a really big way of doing it. And it's whatever community you've got. Come to ours. Ours is lovely, but whatever community you've got of practice, that's great. And then it's about also connecting, even though you might not be able to connect in the same way with people within your organisation, and build yourself a cohort of supporters. Are you ready for some golden rules, Angelique? Are you ready?
Yes. Oh,
Okay,
you have.
fine. I was going to put them up anyway, but you were supposed to say yes. So
Yes.
well done. You
I
said
don't.
yes.
This
Uh,
is the bonus. This is the
so
over
this
delivering
is
from the
this is the
workshop.
over delivery, right? So this is if they're still with us or they're staying to the 40-minute. This is what they get. So these are the kind of controversial ones, and I'm more than happy to take challenges on this. And by the way, this is part of a much larger presentation about this topic. So if people want it, they can get in touch, and we can provide them with the kind of double the number of slides, which goes into a bit more detail. But these golden rules are uncomfortable, I think, for most people. So the first one is don't convince. And all I mean by that is, obviously, you could argue any of this stuff is about convincing people. But what I'm really saying that is, if you find yourself up against a wall and then you want to keep pushing, this is kind of a little bit your point of over screaming, maybe a little bit. If you find yourself really having to fight to make your point, then you've probably already lost. You've probably missed out those first two slides that we talked about. You've probably over relied on the third one. And it means your message just isn't getting heard. So you need to use that as feedback. And that kind of lines up with the next bit, which is accept no. Because I've met so many HR professionals who kind of know they're doing the right thing, know this is the right idea, and they keep pushing and keep pushing and pushing it. And that's fine. And you might win through in the end. But again, have you really aligned values and interests? Probably not. And also, what's the opportunity cost of all of that effort that you've put in to get that one thing across the line? Could you have got three things that people already a little bit bought into across the line at the same time? So I really encourage people to know how to let go. And there's quite a few leaders who have written on this topic before. Knowing when to kind of kill your babies is really useful. I talked about vouchers in the previous slide, but vouchers are people who can vouch for you. So they're people who can kind of either get you airtime, or they're people who you can say, well, you know, I've discussed this with this key person in the business. They've noticed this problem, so this would solve that. So it's kind of using those things without becoming a chronic name dropper in those other perspectives. This is one that I learned the hard way and only recently. So this one is kind of not necessarily with the rest of the research. This is that when people ask for more data, it's basically a no embryo. What I mean by that is they're just delaying it. They're just delaying something. If they're really bought into it, then they might just go, oh, can you just share this one thing with me? That's fine. Like particularly like a finance director, someone might go, can you just send me this one thing? But if you're kind of being told to go away and gather more data, that's a no. And so the tip there is to try and find a way to deprioritize that, or schedule it for another point in the year, or do something else with it if it's within your control, and focus on something else. Because for whatever reason, they're not buying what you're selling at that point, to use your analogy from earlier on. And then going back to my fictitious scenario, which is you've got a project or an idea or a paper that you need to get across, and you've got this opportunity to kind of talk about it. Think of the presentation not as your winning moment, but as your not losing moment. So that's why I talk about coherent knowledge. Up to that point, you should have basically created an environment in which people want to say yes when you walk in the room. They want to agree with it, or they want to modify it, fine, but they want to effectively push it through, not just let it through, but push it through. And a lot of people tend to think, oh, that's my moment to win everyone over. And that's a really big mistake, and one that I made very early in my career and lost a couple of big wins because I kind of went in full sell, having not really built any relationships or really understood the context, just treated them as generic people. And that was the wrong thing to do. In the same project, entirely different board, because there were three organizations I was trying to influence at the time, they almost interrupted me and just kind of didn't want to hear it, and just talked about how amazing the idea was. And then I went away, and I didn't even need to get a yes from them. They were telling me how great my idea was, because I already had good relationships with the people in the room. And then the last one, which I think is easy to get lost in all of this stuff, and it can start to feel like manipulation, it can start to feel like, just don't play games. It ties in with integrity on the previous slide. Just relax into it, try and be yourself, be honest, reveal that honesty. You know, if I'm really honest, what I'd like to say to you is, and that can win people over in a way that kind of manipulating and trying to be Machiavellian about it can't. I'll try to get to those golden rules quickly. Angelique, do you want to challenge or know any more about those?
No, just want to add, like, on the last part, and I think this is about that leadership. You know, what do you expect as a leader, and being acknowledged, and as the future group leader that you want to be in your organization, that integrity and that, you know, being not looked up to, but, you know, people want to follow you because you do have that integrity and that more or less honesty, and you know when to walk away, and you're not trying to convince people things that they don't want to be convinced on. I think if you just paint that whole picture, then you can get that feeling. And yeah, I found this actually really helpful. And I just put myself back probably 10, 15 years ago, where this would have been a very, very valuable presentation. It still is, because this will apply for, always for the rest of my life. But I'm thinking about situations like, yeah, this would have been good if I had gotten this information, and being able to
Yeah.
reflect myself, and a little bit more on that, how we approach the process of influencing.
Well,
Yeah.
exactly. And I've taken the expanded presentation to lots and lots of leadership teams, and I've refined it over time. And the more you see the really good influencers, the more you realize they leverage those first two slides in particular. Not the slide with our faces on it, the first two after that. They leverage those two really, really well. And when it's done well, it's a masterclass. I kind of have muddled my way through working at it, and been able to influence faster and more by using those techniques. But the reality is it's a very complex beast, and there aren't any easy answers. But hopefully this has been useful for everyone.
Yeah. Yeah, and I want to invite especially Emma and everybody else, in the kind of situation, because I just decided, now you don't know, but we will do a public mini mastermind. What do you think about it? Where we get HR people together, because Emma's question is specific. So there is like, how should I deal
Yeah,
with this particular person, this particular
yeah,
situation? And these are great mini masterminds. We take an actual challenge from somebody, and then we have feedback, as a group on it. And obviously, this is
yeah.
something we
You're
can
right.
always. So this will be, keep an eye out on our newsletter, and on our this page, Hello Monday Club, because we will be publishing the date. The mini masterminds we do are invite only and proactive, so interactive. So if you get invited, you're there, and it's an hour and a half, and it's a real working session with a group.
It's not
Um,
like this where they can get away with not saying
yeah,
anything. They are
here's
actually involved on camera speaking. Yeah,
Exactly. And what we do here, this is what we just, it's not just because I think we give great value, but we do this in a more informal weekly setup. So every Thursday, almost every Thursday, I must say, on 1 p.m. GMT, we have this 30-minute interactive live session, topics. Sometimes it's a workshop, sometimes it's like a leadership development class like today. Sometimes it's
mm.
just us exploring a little bit in a topic that we're also not that familiar with yet. Sometimes we have guest experts in future of work areas that are that also, that because we don't know, we are not experts in everything, and the future of work
Yeah,
is very broad. So we do that
yeah,
on every Thursday, and just feel free to check in. If the topic is not your cup of tea, obviously, it's not for you that week, but maybe the other week there will be something that is very relatable. So this is what we do. Open, the mini masterminds are open but invite only, and then we work with our groups of the people that are members from Hello Monday Club even more in depth in like a year-long program. And this is the really transformational journeys in for HR leaders.
yeah. And of course, they can join the mini mastermind, but also if people are already invested because you've sold it so well, to join the community, I've put up the URL so people can come and join us as well, and apply to be part of the community.
Yes. I'll
Uh,
just, yeah, okay, great. You have that. Well, I also, let me see, because this is the community. No, this is the site for
okay.
the community at
Yeah.
hello.com. So it's the easiest way to go directly. Yes, that's it. I have to
Thank you.
over time.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. We've earned our money this week,
yeah, it's
Angelique.
like,
We've done extra time.
yeah,
You've
absolutely.
got sun to go and enjoy. I've got drizzle to go and enjoy. So, have
Indeed.
fun, and we'll see you and everyone else next week.
See you next week. Bye bye.
Take care. Bye bye.